Hi, today we're going to be talking about advertising and propaganda in video games. To begin, Seacart notes that code and architecture constitute video games, explaining that code is what exists before a game is played, and architecture is what is created through a gamer's experience. According to him, video games are coded to be ergodic, meaning random, despite providing predictable experiences. Tetris, for example, always has different patterns and yet always has the same rules. Seacart states that in 13, a first person video game, it's game over when a player kills a police officer. This demonstrates that, in addition to ergodicity, video games are also sometimes embedded with moral values. As most of you have already noticed, video games aren't only made up of code and moral values. Video games can also include advertisements and propaganda, sometimes in the form of pop ups or placed within the game itself. In this presentation, we will discuss examples of video games which have in-game advertisements and propaganda, as well as the social, ethical, and moral aspects that follow. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, advertising is the action of calling something to the attention of the public, especially by paid announcements. So, in-game advertising would be the public broadcast of consumer products, which may influence one's buying habits, using video games as the vehicle. As you can see in the screenshot of NHL 13, there are ads along the boards, similar to in a real life hockey game. So, one type of advertisements would be advert games, which are video games which aim to get people to buy a certain brand, product, or service. They're generally fun and easy to play, and usually free of charge. An example of an advert game is Ralston Foods' Chex Quest, which was created to promote the cereal brand Chex in a new modern way for the brand. This resulted in an almost 300% increase in sales volume, and compared to the previous year, volume share almost doubled. A significant finding is that Chex Quest was able to bring in consumers who hadn't bought the product in a long time, some months and others even years. There's also advertising in social network games. One example would be Zynga's Farmville 2, which can be played through Facebook. In the game, players plant organic blueberries from the existing brand, Cascadian Farm. Zynga states that over 310 million Cascadian Farm organic blueberries had been planted by Farmville players after a short amount of time, and awareness for the brand increased by 550%.
Alright, so now for the more general video games, so there are mainly two types. First is product placement, and you can mostly find it in the sports and racing video games. And second, there is in-game economies, where games self-promote in-game mechanics, and they say that it supposedly provides an enhanced gaming experience. And of course, you have to obtain it by using real-life currency, so real money. So first with product placement. So it has especially been prominent in sports games. So for example, the 2K series and also the games put out by EA, so Electronic Arts, which is a video game company. And in these games, big brands like Coca-Cola, Adidas, Nike, and Gatorade, they're promoted just like they would be in real life. So you can see them on the jerseys of the players, the billboards around the arena, the sidelines where the players sit. Yeah, so now sports game, they're beginning to reflect every tiny detail of reality, even the ads. Some games have even gone as far as putting unskippable ads during loading screen. So you have to watch the ad in order to continue playing. And a lot of people have shown their dissatisfaction with these. A positive side could be that some ads can barely be seen, so they don't really affect the gameplay. And users, for me for example, sometimes don't even see them. So they still make money and it doesn't really bother the user. So I'd say that it's fine. It's a win-win for both the user and the shareholders that want to make money. However, if we take another perspective, like Kant's imperative, the company only treats us as a means to make money, not an end. Like they put tons of ads and they don't care about our experience. Like you pay $80 for that's a premium price tag for a game, but you still get ads. So yeah, many people were not satisfied with it. And also, like, from a consequentialist perspective, like, does a multi-million-dollar company really need to make more money on in-game ads, even if the people are really not satisfied with it? Like, personally, I'd say no. So that's one of the downsides. Now for in-game economies. So you're gonna have two types. League of Legends and Fortnite. They provide cosmetics, so it only affects the gameplay, like how it looks. But other games like Call of Duty Warzone, you can buy items that give you an advantage over other players. So for games like League of Legends and Fortnite, I'd say it's fine because you don't they advertise it in their client, but not that much. So you can buy the cosmetics you want, and the company gets a certain amount of money for it. But it doesn't affect the gameplay, so it doesn't give you an advantage. You only buy it if you want to. However, like now, if we take Call of Duty and we apply Kant's categorical imperative in a game where you can buy a game that gives you an advantage, now there's an issue. Because, so for example, let's say the goal of the company is to make money, because the shareholders want a profit, so they create in-game items that give you an advantage. But if everybody bought these items, then no one would have an advantage over anyone else. So then it wouldn't work. So the goal couldn't be achieved. So this doesn't work. Yeah, it's it could be considered immoral from Kant's perspective, and like have a negative social impact.
Although social influences can be observed in single player games, they can especially be observed when it comes to multiplayer games, and this can be explained by the phenomenon of peer pressure. For instance, children are likely to ask their parents to buy them brands which they have already seen in video games. From an ethical perspective, product advertisement in video games is ethically correct since it measures up to other forms of advertisements, such as television ads, billboards, and ads found on social media. Sponsors and brand promoters focus on profits, which is favorable to them, thus making them egoists, which are people whose actions are motivated by selfish desires. Also, ads are typically placed after what is considered a win in the game, such as a kill streak or clearing a level, since research has found that players tend to remember a brand more if it's associated with a positive experience. In this case, it's immoral since these video game companies are essentially conditioning and ultimately manipulating their players into liking the brand. For this reason, I personally disagree with game designers' use of ads.
So I'll be talking about in-game propaganda. By definition, it is a spreading of ideas, information, or rumor for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, a cause, or a person using video games as a vehicle. I'll be specifically talking about military propaganda, which is very common in video games, especially war-related ones. In general, governments and militaries use video games as a platform to spread their ideas or beliefs. Some video games were not only created for entertainment, but also for military training purposes. These games often recreate real political events from a biased viewpoint. So, game developers use video games to create simulations that are characterized by 1. The construction of persuasive narratives. So, the video game usually displays a certain political event from a perspective that makes one viewpoint more appealing, more reasonable than the other. Second, we have the falsified display of military strength. This is when political or military groups use video games to portray themselves as being powerful or dominating by simulating successful attacks, which can also be motivational to the game player. Thirdly, we have the demonization of political opponents. These games often show the opposing forces engaging in atrocities such as war crimes, torture, and terrorism. Lastly, there's a player-avatar connection. So since many of these games are first-person shooter games, they allowed the player to be fully immersed in it, especially due to the fact that, quote-unquote, these games tend to reference real people, are modeled on real geography, incorporate pictures and videos, and recreate memorable events. Therefore, players not only get a first-person perspective of the game, but they ultimately embody their character, which makes it so that the player is an active participant in the events of the game. So for my first example, I have America's Army, which is an online first-person shooter game released by the United States Army. They use this video as a platform for military propaganda, mainly to recruit players as young as 13 years old. In fact, the Army recruitment numbers have gone up along with the popularity of the game. For my second example, we have the Special Forces series. This first-person shooter game was released by a Lebanese political group, and it allows players to participate in a virtual war with Israel by simulating real-life past conflicts. So the difference here is that this particular game illustrates the war from the viewpoint of violent non-state actors who are generally considered as being terrorists. Now, moving on to the ethics of in-game propaganda, this is our stance on the subject. We believe that in-game propaganda is immoral, not only because video games can change the player's political viewpoints in a way that is favorable to the game developers, but also because these military games have too much presence in children's culture. So through their attempts to recruit young soldiers and through the overall glorification of the concept of war, game developers can wrongfully impact not only the player's beliefs, but also their behavior. This resembles the feminist ethical theory in the sense that gamers, especially kids and teenagers, should pursue a caring way of living life rather than seeing the world as being violence-centered. So our opinion does have its weaknesses, particularly every individual deserves rights according to the rights theory. They have freedom of choice, meaning that they're allowed to their own opinion on a certain matter. In fact, by depriving the players from their own political opinions, it would be considered morally incorrect. So the opposing opinion is formed by the game developers. More precisely, the players are simply treated as a means to an end rather than an end in order for political and/or military actors to achieve their goals. Let it be more military training, recruiting new soldiers, or influencing their political views. They think about the favorable outcomes that could stem from in-game propaganda, which is similar to the consequentialist theory.